Broward County, Florida Sheriff Scott Israel has been compared to the much-lauded American lawmen of the past, men like Wyatt Earp, Bat Masterson, and Roscoe P. Coltrane. A humble and self-effacing man, Sheriff Israel has been cast into the public eye due to recent tragic events. Prior to his heroic response to the crisis that has rocked the nation, his dynamic and progressive leadership was already innovating the Sheriff's Department. Many of his progressive policy changes have been highlighted by the sheriff himself. For example, in order to remove the stigma that certain labels carry, a policy has been enacted to no longer refer to African Americans convicted of rape as rapists, but instead to refer to them as persons with aggressive reproduction cycles. Those convicted of multiple aggravated rapes will continue to be referred to as Cosbys. Another successful policy in combating white institutional bias within the department is modification of the entrance exam scoring criteria. Hiring tests for deputy positions now take into account the recruit's race and ethnicity when assessing his score. African American candidates will be awarded 10 extra points if they correctly identify where in their names to place the apostrophe. To counteract racial profiling and victim bias, this latest policy has purged the county's mugshot book of all persons of color. The heavily abridged compilation, now fitting on a 3x5 index card, displays only 2 convicted criminals, a domestic abuse offender and a Puerto Rican carjacker that passes for white. Those victims requesting to view perpetrators with skin tones a darker shade of guilty will now be charged with a hate crime. And arguably the most effective of these recent policy initiatives, the police station's printed forms for criminal complaints will no longer have a checkbox for the category, "I just got mugged by a nigger." In spite of these visionary and forward-thinking approaches to law enforcement, no one could have predicted the horrible events that were to shock the nation. Nicholas Cruz, a disturbed former Jewish student of Stoneman Douglas High School, perpetrated a mass shooting at his alma mater, killing 17 and injuring many others. Following the shock and horror of this event, Sheriff Israel became a lightning rod, attracting both praise and criticism. Initially lauded by the press, Israel, along with Senator Rubio and an NRA spokesperson, was invited to a town hall meeting hosted by CNN. The audience, containing more actors pretending to be students than the third season of Glee, confronted the panel with professionally scripted questions. Israel was especially praised by the media for his attacks on the NRA and gun ownership rights. In concert with the sheriff's positions, students took to the streets advocating such causes as the abolition of the Second Amendment and the recognition of genital piercings as a universal human right. However, Israel's sterling reputation, even amongst his proponents, began to tarnish as revelations of inaction and dereliction of duty began to surface. Much like the minstrels following brave Sir Robin in quest for the Holy Grail, accusations of cowardice began following the sheriff. Newly released video showing the shameful actions of an armed police guard at the school has greatly angered residents. Wetting himself more than Stephen Hawking with a leaking sippy cup, the deputy refused to intervene and instead hid behind a stairwell. Subsequent reports also indicate that an additional 4 sheriff deputies who arrived on the scene refused to enter the school while active gunfire could still be heard. According to one eyewitness, the cops were more hesitant to make a move against a Jewish criminal than even Jeff Sessions. To make matters worse, records show that the sheriff's office was forewarned by the perpetrator himself. ignoring more requests to come out to the caller's home than a Domino's delivery driver in a housing project, Israel chose to do nothing when crews phoned the police and begged to be taken into custody. With such damning revelations, even CNN's Jake Tapper indignantly questioned Israel, who consistently countered any suggestion of responsibility or culpability in the matter. Tapper was obviously confused by the sheriff's seemingly flippant remark, quote, "If ifs and buts were candies and nuts, OJ would still be in the record books," unquote. This in turn prompted a response from OJ Simpson, quote, "Nigga, what the fuck you talking about?" unquote. This media backlash has many calling for Sheriff Israel to resign from office. It has even resulted in ABC canceling a reboot of a popular Peter Falk series that was to be based on the sheriff's life called Lieutenant Shalombo. In a desperate attempt to salvage his waning respectability, the sheriff has made some at least superficial changes to his department. For example, police vehicle decals will soon be displaying the traditional logo to serve and protect, replacing Broward's existing logo to run and hide. Few have any expectations, however, that these efforts will stem the tide of criticism directed at the sheriff. Nonetheless, Israel is confident that, like his namesake, he will continue to be supported indefinitely by the American taxpayer.
There you go. Spoopy Autiste back again.